Hello and welcome. I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone who watched, liked and commented on my first video. You've given me the drive to continue this thing and I'm very grateful for all your support. Today I'm going to be looking at 4 more films from the London Film Festival. I'm combining days 2 and 3 to create one mega video. I've decided to ease up a little on my viewing schedule over the last couple of days so that I would have the time and space to be able to review these films properly. But it does mean that I'm not covering everything on offer at LFF. I'd therefore recommend going to the BFI website if you want to see the full array of programming. I'll leave a link in the description. Now, I want to start things off by saying that whoever programmed Monday morning's press and industry schedule is a verified genius, because it meant I started my day with Stray. Produced, directed, filmed and edited by Elizabeth Lowe, we love a multi-talented queen. Stray is a documentary that closely follows a dog through the streets of Istanbul over the course of a couple of years. Last century, a law passed making the killing of street dogs illegal in Turkey, and they are now pretty much free to roam and do as they please. The star of the show is Zeytin, a beautiful honey-coloured stray dog, strong and confident. It's clear why she caught the eye of the filmmaker. Now, Stray takes a very hands-off approach to its subject matter, to the point where it's easy to forget that there's a human behind the camera. The choice to film the documentary primarily at a dog level was a stroke of genius. We weave in and out of cars, across streets, through crowds of people, all from a visual point of view that matches that of our subject. It's a very fly-on-the-wall style of filmmaking that reminded me somewhat of the documentary Honeyland that came out last year, which is also well worth a watch. And that's not to negate the choices that so clearly went into the construction of the film or its narrative. It in fact contributes to this idea of a dog's world, where human activity is, if not obsolete, then at least on the fringes. The dogs will roam where they please, and if they want to sit down in the middle of a busy road, then that's what they're going to do. And that's when Stray gets really interesting, in this parallelism that is drawn between man and man's best friend. A group of young Syrian refugees frequently make an appearance in the narrative, and it's a shocking state of affairs that they seem to possess fewer rights than the dogs they share the streets with. The degree of my love for this documentary is of course influenced by the fact that I am a dog lover. I knew within the first 5 minutes of sitting down to watch this that I was going to like it, not just because of the unique way in which it was filmed, but because there's an unfaltering, intrinsic purity to the subject matter. There are several moments in the film that are joyous to watch, not least because these dogs are charismatic protagonists, but I won't give details for want of spoiling them. I will say, however, that you should look out for the end credit scene because it's just a little bit special. Dogwoofer distributing a film about dogs. I don't think my life will ever feel this complete ever again, so I'm going to give Stray a tail-wagging 8 out of 10. Now, if you fancy giving this a watch, it's available on BFI Player tonight, the 7th of October. Give it a watch. It's lovely. It's a really nice time. I really recommend it. And it was a nice way to start a Monday morning, and I don't think you get much higher praise than that. Now, my second film was Herself, directed by Fadila Lloyd, who directed Mamma Mia and The Iron Lady, amongst other things. She clearly has range. Co-written by Malcolm Campbell and Claire Dunn, who also puts in a stellar performance as the film's protagonist, Sandra. It tells the story of a domestic abuse survivor living in Dublin with her 2 young daughters. In an attempt to fight back against a broken housing system, she decides to build one of her own. This is one of those rare and wonderful films that single-handedly destroys your faith in humanity and then proceeds to build it back up piece by piece. Though the emotional beats follow a familiar enough pattern, the film manages to retain a freshness, mostly in part to Claire Dunn's brilliant core performance. Though the side characters could have done with more development, I accept that there's only so much that can be done within 90 minutes. It was still nice to see Harriet Walter and Conleth Hill giving subdued, believable performances as a doctor and construction worker respectively. And that's where the film really shines. Everyone feels like an authentic character, even if they're only a bit character. They feel very real and very grounded. Though a clear antagonist can be found in the abusive husband, I found myself equally antagonised by the corrupt laws and ethics that see the 2 young girls being carted back and forth between mother and father. It's a frustrating watch, and it knows exactly what it's doing when it appeals to the audience. The little bit of rebellion that Sharon represents in this society of crumbling humanism is enough to have you rooting for her tenfold. As to the smaller details of construction, a fortune must have been spent on buying the rights to every song that makes an appearance in this film. But a banger's a banger, and I'm not going to complain about it. Another aspect of the film I loved was how vivid the colour green was and how present it was. From the glow of high-vis jackets to the lush tones of summer at golden hour, the entire palette began to shine with a new beginning. It felt fresh, it was like rebirth. Herself is currently ranked as my favourite film of the festival. You can check out my letterbox for the full rankings, and it's primarily because it's the one that has had the biggest emotional impact on me. And that's something that will be personal to everyone. It will differ from person to person. But that's part of the joy of things, right? I'm giving Herself an 8 out of 10. It'll be available on BFI Player on the 8th of October. It was due a wider release on the 16th, but this has been postponed due to COVID, so I recommend you just get in there on the 8th. Film number 3 was Farewell, Amor. Written and directed by Ekwe Masangi, this drama sees a family reuniting in an American airport after 17 years apart, the mother and daughter relocating there from Angola when their immigration papers are finally approved. What they discover upon their arrival into the new country is that time and cultural disparities have rendered them strangers again. And what I loved most about this film was its willingness to tell the narrative from 3 different perspectives. It's so easy these days for westernised perspectives to steamroll over films that deal in cultural disparities and thematics, but Farewell, Amor takes important steps in showing all sides of the story. Walter, Sylvia and Esther are all complex characters, and it was refreshing to see them each given the space just to exist. The only real downside of this split in point of view is that by the time we reach the end of the film, Walter, whose point of view we start with, has become less familiar to us. Now, Farewell, Amor isn't always the most grabbing film, but that doesn't prevent it from being very grounded in today's reality. We are presented with a situation that a lot of people have found themselves in. And for a debut feature film, I think it dealt with its core themes well. I'm not convinced it always knew what it wanted to say or which dynamics it necessarily wanted to foreground, but there's enough in there to pick through and ponder. The most impressive thing about Farewell, Amor was definitely its commitment to showing differing cultural perspectives. It didn't always do this spectacularly, but I think the willingness to try is notable in itself. I'm going to give Farewell, Amor a 7 out of 10. It'll be available to watch on BFI Player on the 9th of October. My 4th and final film was documentary I Am Samuel, directed by Pete Murumi. When Samuel, a young man raised on a farm in rural Kenya, moves to the capital of Nairobi, he meets Alex, the love of his life. But under the Kenyan Constitution's penal code, homosexual acts are outlawed and carry a 14-year prison sentence. The 2 men remain aware of the acts of violence carried out around them and must learn to balance the pressures of love, family loyalty, and finding a community in which they feel accepted. The very existence of this film alone is a small miracle, and a very real reminder that in many parts of the world, people of the LGBTQ+ community are still not accepted. The few glimpses of very real violence that the documentary does decide to show us are abhorrent, and it's important to remember that this still happens and that the fight to erase bigotry is an ongoing one. I Am Samuel is a lovely statement film that's incredibly well-meaning, but it's let down by the sheer fact that there's just not enough meat on its bones. The few moments where it does attempt to engage in a real discourse are short-lived and lack exploration. As a story, it's a lovely one. As a documentary, I sadly remain ill-informed and in the dark on the issues it never fully addresses. Part of this may be because it wouldn't be safe to film a documentary explicitly on the subject matter, but maybe that's the next step. And that's kind of my point. What are the next steps? What's being done on a political level, if anything, to try and change these archaic laws? I want to know more. I Am Samuel is a mild-mannered film. I'd even go as far as to call it sweet. It's not a bad film. It's really not. I'm not in no way saying it's a bad film. I'm really glad that it exists, but there was certainly much more scope to be had, and I can't help but find that frustrating. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10, and it's available on BFI Player on the 10th of October. And like all the films I've discussed today, it's still worth a watch. And that's all from days 2 and 3. Some really great films in there, and I really do urge you to seek them out. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to drop a like down below. It really helps me out. And if you're interested in seeing more reviews and film festival content in the coming weeks, be sure to subscribe. Until next time!